Hello and welcome to the Ross and Cromarty Citizens Advice Bureau Right Here, Right Now podcast. Today I have two advisors from our money advice team, William and Simon, joining me. Hi guys, how are you today?
Hi Emily. Yeah, not bad, thanks.
How you doing? I'm not too bad. Thank you for asking.
Brilliant. So, as we've got money advice advisors here, we're going to talk about debt today, and we're going to split this podcast into a part 1 and a part 2. So, in this podcast, part 1, we're going to discuss debt, how you find yourself in debt, and what happens when you're in debt. And in our next podcast, part 2, we're going to cover what you should do if you find yourself in debt, what your options are, and how we can help you. So, let's get into it. Are there certain types of people that we see in debt?
Well, no, it's can affect anybody at all. Absolutely anybody. Those that are not working, or those that are working, and even those on large salaries through their employment. So it can affect absolutely anybody. In fact, most people do have some kind of debt, and a lot of people think that it's bad. It's not. It's not bad to be in debt. It's not a choice. It just through circumstance that it happens, and it, as I say, can happen to absolutely anybody.
Yeah, I think that rings true for everybody. Everybody's got some sort of debt, whether that be long-term or short-term debts. It's a normal part of life to be in debt at some point.
Yes, very much so. People have mortgages and car finance, and maybe you're paying a holiday app or something like that. There's all sorts of debts, and as long as they're manageable, then that's absolutely fine. But it's when there's a big change of circumstances, and you can start finding debts getting a little bit out of control, or more difficult to control. They start impacting other parts of your life. Whether you can afford to carry on, heating your house adequately or feeding your family. That can start to really have an impact. And those changes of circumstances could be anything. You could be on a very well-paid job, and you unfortunately get made redundant. You could have a bereavement in the family, and that's left some debts. A relationship breakdown, we do see that quite a lot, where a couple have decided to go through a divorce, or partners have decided to separate, and again, that's an expensive process, and can also leave debts at the end of that. And I think probably the most common one, and I'm sure William would agree, is health issues. So there's plenty of people that have the same sort of debts as everyone else. Maybe a mortgage or car finance, that type of thing, and have a job and everything's going well, and they're hit with poor health, and they're forced to stop work. They see a massive drop in household income. Okay, benefits might be able to help to an extent, but you might be left with things that you could afford, but you can no longer afford. So that can play a big part as well.
It's very true. I would agree with you, Simon, what you're saying about the health issues. It's very true, and also a person's mental health can have a major impact as well. And this is always quite prevalent at the moment with lockdown and the effects of coming out of lockdown. The health issues can include the mental health aspect of it as well.
I couldn't agree more. I think you're quite right. And when people are struggling with their mental health, things, you just feel like everything's getting on top of you. You're just not in a good place. What I've found, and again, I'm sure William, you're the same, is a lot of people just want to sort of bury their head in the sand and just sort of hide away from it. And that's totally understandable. We're not here to judge anyone, but
that's true. That's true.
I totally get why people do that. But ignoring creditor letters or debt collector letters, that can actually make your situation worse. It can lead to additional interest being applied to debts. It can lead to charges for late payments and things like that. But it can also progress as well. You can end up, getting, involved with the courts, for example, things like that. And it really does sort of hamper all our clients' opportunities to get on top of their current situation. It doesn't mean that you can't fix it, but it just makes it a little bit more difficult, and it can become more stressful, especially when you're being chased, by text or by phone or by email, by letter,
Exactly.
for an outstanding amount. So yeah, the mental health side of it is. Debts and mental health, unfortunately, are not a good mix.
I think that really rings true. And as you said before, we all have some kind of debt. It's quite a normal part of life, but these kind of significant life changes could happen to any of us at any point in time. And it's those kind of big changes, not always, but those kind of big changes that can cause debt to become too much of an issue. It starts to build, things start to spiral, and that's where it becomes out of control and it's more difficult to cope with. And I think you're bang on with mental health as well. Mental health can impact your debt because you're not keeping on top of it, but the debt can also then impact on your mental health, and it causes more stress and more worry, and it makes it makes your mental health even worse. So you end up kind of in a vicious cycle.
Yeah, and that also feeds on to a part of what Simon was saying about some clients who may bury their head in the sand, and that makes it worse. The mental health exacerbates it. So,
okie doke. So what happens when you are in debt and you owe money?
I think certainly from our point of view, there are two different categories of debt from our end. You have what we term priority debts, where they can have a pretty significant impact to you and quite quickly. And then you've got non-priority debts, which are just as important, but it's less likely to see significant impacts to you quickly. So an example, or a few examples maybe, of priority debts would be anything connected to your house. So your mortgage payments, if you fall behind in your mortgage payments and you're starting to get into significant arrears there. Likewise with rent. If you start falling behind in your rent or you're unable to keep it up, that can have a massive impact. And just to be brutal, that could result in you losing the roof over your head. Council tax. So if you aren't paying your council tax, or you're not following the process for paying your council tax, like making sure it's paid on or before the 1st of every month, you can start finding arrears building up, and then you can end up looking at normally it goes through the Sheriff Court and then on to Scott & Co, who are the messengers at arms, and all the charges that go along with that. So you go from one bill to an even bigger bill. Utilities. Again, electric, gas, even oil. If you don't keep up with these payments, you could find your ability to pay by direct debit is removed, and you've got to pay sort of pay as you go using a key or a card meter. Certainly for electricity and gas. Oil, they could just refuse to provide you oil if you've got arrears until the arrears are cleared. So you could be left potentially either without electricity, gas, or oil, which obviously for most folk is an enormous impact. You've also got things like hire purchase as well. You see this quite a lot. So a good example of this would be like car finance. So if you're not keeping up with car finance payments, for example, they could repossess your car. So you could just find out one day that somebody turns up at your door and say, look, we're sorry, we've sent you all these letters, we've never had a response, we're here to take the car away. Yeah. And therefore you lose your ability to get around. Another one, I don't believe this company is actually in operation anymore, but you do see an awful lot of people still making payments, is Bright House. Or that style of agreement. So anybody that's not familiar with Bright House was where you could go in, you could buy goods, and that could be anything from white goods like washing machines and tumble dryers and fridge freezers, all that sort of stuff, right through to games consoles and things. But you pay it up So every month you pay a certain amount over so many years, and then you'd own it at the end of that. Now, those agreements are, if you don't maintain those payments and you fall into arrears, you've got the possibility of those items being removed as well, because you don't own them yet. Another example of priority debts is you don't see a huge amount of these, thankfully, but are guarantor loans. So if you're a guarantor for somebody, so somebody maybe has got poor credit, they apply for a guarantor loan, and you essentially sort of underwrite it. So if they don't keep up with their payments, then the finance company can contact you, and then you have to make those payments instead. Okay, and a lot of these can be quite difficult to deal with, because a lot of our clients sign these in good faith that their friends or family are going to maintain these payments, and for whatever reason they can't, and then next thing you're being chased for multiples of thousands of pounds for clearing the debt. So guarantor loans are you've got to be careful about.
As Simon said, of course, with guarantor loans, that's very, very rare that we see those, though. The other priority debts that Simon mentioned are more, common for ourselves that we would see.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Certainly for rent and council tax and utilities, actually, especially these days, then yes, they're very prevalent in debt advice, and it's a key one to get on top of, and get something in place to protect you.
Yeah, and I think it completely, makes sense that those things would be priority, because those are kind of things that we would class as essential payments to live and to go about our lives. You need to have a home, maintain your home, heat your home, things like that. And for a lot of people, a hire purchase of a car is also something that's very essential, particularly up here in the Highlands. A lot of people really, really need their cars to get around, to get back and forth to work and things like that. So when there starts to become issues with being able to pay these things, you need to start to look at how do you get these things sorted out first.
Yeah, and a byproduct of that is when it comes to collecting these arrears, not all organisations have access to be able to do this, but depending on the stage they get to, you could find if you're in receipt of benefits, you could actually have benefit deductions applied, where they take a predetermined amount from your benefits, and unfortunately you've got very little say in the matter. Sometimes if you contact us, we can help, but that can happen. If you're working, a similar sort of setup is a wage arrestment. So essentially, they will arrest your wage or part of it, where they take a proportion of your wage, and this is done through your employer, to pay back your debts. And then last but not least, and this sometimes can be the most disruptive, is the bank arrestment, where essentially they'll contact your bank, and this all has to be done through the courts, but they'll contact your bank and arrest your bank account, and they can take money directly from your account. Now, there are protected amounts and things like that, so they can't just empty your account. Likewise, they can't take 100% of your wage or 100% of your benefit. But nonetheless, nobody wants to see those things go down without their say so, or what they deem as affordable. So it's it can have a massive effect. So to round things off on that side of things, priority debts, you really don't want to be ignoring those. You really want to seek help as soon as you possibly can.
Yeah, I think that completely makes sense as well. I've seen a few clients in my own experience who have got benefit deductions or wage arrestment, and it is quite a large proportion compared to what they believe that they can afford, and they don't really have a choice in the matter. So you would want to try and sort these things out and come to an agreement for something that is affordable before you get to the stage where the choice is really taken away from you.
Very much so. Very much so. And the same goes with non-priority debts, and I'll let William pick up on those. But yeah, the kind of the key here is don't ignore your debts and your commitments. It's so important to get help, because there is help out there, and creditors sign up to an awful lot of agreements and charters and rules on lending. And once you start communicating with them, most of the time, certainly my experience, and I hope William's the same, most creditors, especially debt collectors, funnily enough, are actually very, very nice to deal with. They're very understanding.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that one, Simon. It's most of the creditors very understanding, especially in these times where we've had the lockdown and everything's gone to not normal, as I would say. So yeah, the creditors on the whole can be and are very understanding.
I think that's really reassuring to hear. I think although, yes, they are looking to get the money back, they're looking to do that in a way that is going to be manageable for the person in debt, because at the end of the day, it benefits both sides to get that money paid back in a way that's manageable, controllable, and it doesn't affect either side too much to come to an agreement like that.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it's the days have been really harassed by debt collectors and creditors. Certainly in Scotland, they're not really there anymore. I think creditors have realised that the kind of really harsh tactics maybe of old. If you're already feeling under pressure because of debts, you just close up, and yes, that still makes the situation worse, but they don't get their money back. It might result in a bankruptcy. However, nowadays the creditors are much more understanding. They're much more empathetic with people's situations, and I think that helps the creditor as well, because if you in the grand scheme of things can arrange an affordable repayment, the creditor's getting their money back at the end of the day, and that's what they're wanting. And we're totally impartial. We're not here to try and get you out of paying anything. We're just trying to make sure you only pay what you can afford and what you need to. So it's I think creditors are very understanding, and like I said, debt collectors especially, because they're dealing with it day in day out.
Yes, exactly.
Very, very understanding to people's circumstances, and it makes it, once you open up and the communication starts, it really does make a huge difference.
That's great. I think it's really reassuring for people to hear that, debt collectors are not just going to be berating them and chasing them, but actually want to work with them to work on something that's manageable.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
I was just going to pick up on a point that Simon made there. Simon covered the priority debts that we deal with. Also, we deal with non-priority debts, which, as you can imagine, as Simon alluded to as well, they're not so much of an emergency, but these sort of things can include overdrafts with your bank, your credit card bills that come through your door, payday loans, even down to mobile phone contracts. That's the kind of non-priority debts that we tend to find are more common with ourselves. I don't know about yourself, Simon.
Yeah, very much so. Same as maybe unsecured loans, and I suppose to an extent benefit overpayments or advance payments if you're a universal credit recipient. So you kind of everything that wasn't mentioned in priority debts, I suppose, is then by nature a non-priority debt, but still very important. But as you correctly said, William, it's unlikely to be an absolute emergency, although it can be occasionally.
It can on occasion, yeah. But as well as that, wage arrestments, which Simon mentioned previously for priority debts, and bank arrestments, that can happen with non-priority debts as well. So, the clients really need to be on top of things as best they can with these sort of things as well.
Mm-hmm. But the priority debts would be the ones you would look to deal with first, because they're the most urgent.
Yes,
because the fallout of not making repayments to those debts is going to be more significant in your daily life, I guess.
Yeah, especially as we mentioned previously, mortgages and council tax and energy bills, which of course these days are more and more prevalent.
And I suppose with all the different the two different types of debt and all the different types of debt that you can have, it can be quite overwhelming and quite difficult to kind of organize it in your mind as well, to look at, oh, I owe this to this person and this to this person, and not quite sure which one you should deal with first and how you should go about dealing with it. So what are some of the things that people should do? Not saying, oh, you need to plan everything out and create a table of everything, but what are some of the things that you think that people should do to start to be able to manage their debts?
From my end, as a money advisor at Citizens Advice, the Ross and Cromarty Citizens Advice Bureau, what we need to do is make sure that we can protect you, and the key is to reach out for help. We do the hard work for you. We require very little information, certainly in the grand scheme of things, to build a case, a money advice case with a client. And then we do a lot of the contacting of the creditors, whether that's over the phone, whether that's by email, by letter, and we can start to try and work with, sort of bridge the gap between you and your creditors, and try and make things more manageable. And one of the things that we do with all creditors is we ask that we become your point of contact. So if they've got any questions, or if they need to request anything, or anything's changed, they actually come to us first, because we can check to make sure they're following all the rules and procedures that they need to follow. And then we can pass over only the key information to the clients. That could be something as simple as just providing maybe a bank statement or something like that, and try and take some of the pressure off the clients in doing so. So yeah, reach out to us at CAB. That would be my recommendation.
And when you're in debts, what are some of the things that might start to happen? So you're going to be contacted by creditors, and they're going to try and get in touch with you. But what should you be kind of looking out for?
The creditors may contact you by letter, by email, by phone. Some people might think that well, that they won't answer it. They won't answer the letters. They won't answer because they think they're being harassed. That's not the case with it. It's just that they're trying to get as much help for them as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Fees and additional interest might be added for any payments that are missed.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of thing. The creditors, as I say, if they are trying to contact you, they won't go down the route of initiating action straight away. They do give an opportunity for a client to catch up with any payments that they've missed before they do that. So there is plenty of opportunity for the client not to get themselves into that state,
mm-hmm.
Not to panic, if you like. But one thing we find as well that I don't know about you, Simon, but a lot of clients, well, not a lot, but some clients may come to us and say, "Oh, I haven't kept any of my emails. I haven't kept any of my letters. I don't open my letters. I've burnt them." We shouldn't do that, because that's not helping their case. We ask them to, even if they've got letters that they haven't opened for fear of what the contents are, we ask them to bring them in and we'll open them for them, to help them that way.
Yeah. I mean, I've had clients just recently actually, drop off a bundle of unopened mail, and some things may just be statements, that require absolutely nothing. It's just to update the account holder.
Yeah.
Other times it could be your opportunity to stop court action, for example, against you, or if you've got an agreement, as most of these debts will involve, that your agreement is due to be terminated and things like that. It could be that your debts have been passed or even sold on to a debt collector or another company. It's really important that we get this information, because in the wonderful world of debt advice, if somebody, say, takes a loan out with their bank, for argument's sake, okay, and they don't pay it, it might go to a debt collectors and they don't get any luck trying to get in touch with you. Then it might go to another debt collectors and another debt collectors. And then at some point, the bank may decide to actually sell the debt. And that then goes to another company who bought your debt. And then they get debt collectors involved. And the problem with that is, from our end, we will always get to the bottom of how much you owe and who you owe the money to. That's not in doubt. It's just how long it takes us to get there, because we then have to go right back to the beginning, to the bank or the original debt collectors, and then find out when that was sold and who it was sold to, and have they decided to take any further action against you to recover any outstanding amounts. Whereas if we've got letters, we can see that kind of that history, that audit trail, if you like, of where things are. And we can jump right to where we need to be, and we can start dealing with it faster. Now,
sorry, I was just going to say, yes, it makes it that little bit easier if we do have the letters and any emails that have been sent by the creditors. So it does make it that bit easier, and maybe get the client a quicker resolution.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, sometimes it's quite nice to get your detective cap on and hunt around for what's actually happening with a debt or debts for a particular client. But I mean, ultimately for the client, as you correctly said, we're trying to get a solution for you. And if we've got to spend, and not only that, we're not talking like a few days. I mean, things can drag on for months. Waiting for responses from very large organizations. And, the problem with that is that other creditors might give you, 60 days to get your solution to them. So that could be paying it back or giving them a token offer. And we'll come on to things like that later. But it could also be, they could be keen to take you to court and things like that. And that means a non-priority debt can become a priority debt. And that's because we can't confirm all your debts because other creditors are taking so long to reply. Again, whereas if we've got the letters, we can just jump straight to the point that we need to, and just kind of move your case forward much, much more efficiently. So it's, please don't bin or delete things. Just keep hold of them, drop them off to the bureau. We'll open them and we'll deal with them for you.
Okay, so I think that might be a really good place to wrap up for today. So I just kind of want to reiterate some of the things that we've discussed. So debt really can happen to anybody. We all have some form of debt, and it's just when those things build and start to become out of control that we really have an issue with them. There are priority debts, which are kind of the things that are essential and should be repaid as soon as possible, and non-priority debts, which are less urgent but can become urgent if they're ignored for too long. And things that will start to happen when you do have debts is creditors will try to contact you, but they're contacting you to try and work out ways for this to be paid off in a way that's manageable. They're not harassing you, they're not making demands, they're just trying to work with you. And as a result of that, you should be keeping all of the contact that you've had, any letters and any emails. And then, if you really can't manage it yourself, you should get in touch with someone who can help, like yourselves at CAB, who can then start to investigate and look to start resolving some of these things. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I would say that's a very accurate description. And so, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So in the next podcast, we're going to go into a bit of a further discussion about what you should do, what some of the options are, and look again at what we do to help as well. So we'll wrap it up for today, guys. As always, we would love to hear from our audience, and if anybody has any topics that they would like us to discuss or cover in the podcast, then you can add a comment below the YouTube video of this podcast. You can message us on our Facebook page, or you can email us at advisor@honestcab.casonline.org.uk. But that's it for today. Thank you very much, guys, for joining me, and I look forward to continuing this discussion soon.
Thanks, Emily.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.